When a man is beaten down to the ground and he is capable of rising up through the adversity, through the challenges, through the anxiety and confusion and pain above all, something almost magical happens on the other side.
What was that moment in time you said, you know what, I'm going to choose purpose and meaning over, let's just call it immediate gratification and outside stimuli?
You know, I've probably never said this before on a podcast. That's a really good question. I wanted in my life to be the person that protected the weak.
As a person going through life, why is it important? Let's call it a belief in something greater than yourself. Why is that important?
I think we are all here in this planet to serve something higher than ourselves. I truly believe also that every one of us has the opportunity to do something great.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, a podcast about growth, mindset, and entrepreneurship. I'm Moshe Popack, and today I chat with Rafa Conde. Rafa is an ex-DEA Narcotics and SWAT officer and the founder and CEO of Man of War, one of the fastest growing high-performance personal development companies in the world. The company focuses on the resurgence of the warrior mindset, principles, and philosophies, and it helps develop culture in the business world and a framework to live a successful life. Rafa and I just wrapped up our conversation, and this was an inspiring episode. So enjoy learning from and listening to Rafa Conde. Hi, Rafa, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It is an absolute honor.
Thank you so much. The thing that really resonates with me, and I'm so glad to have you on the show, always as a little child, is the ideas of the samurai. And I know, and we can get into that, and we'll speak about that. But I know you talk about the warrior mindset. What does that mean to you?
The warrior mindset to me, when you break it down, is truly living by a code. And when you break this code down, we're talking about integrity, honor, resiliency, serving for a higher purpose. And in the end, it's really exhibiting your actions at the highest of levels, living by this moral code that when you really look at it and you step outside the box, it's something almost magical that we, in our day and age now, have completely lost.
Why do you think, what has happened as far as background? Did we have it maybe 100, 200 years ago, and then something actually happened that took that away?
Well, you go back hundreds of years ago, the samurai, the Spartans, the Knights Templar, and these warrior cultures had that edge, right? They lived their lives sharpening their blades. They sharpened their mind, their skill set. In the end, we lost this. We lost this sharpness in our lives. We started step by step. Instead of moving forward, we started to retreat in the battle. These men, you go back into Spartan history, the women would send these men out to combat, and, they would tell them, you come back with it or on it. And they were referring to the shield, right? You either come back with that shield or you come dead on that shield, but don't you dare come back without a shield, right? With that type of resiliency, that type of mindset, that gave a man fire. We've lost that. Now everything is complacency, second guessing, procrastination, weakness. And it has been little by little, you've seen the steps in retreat backwards since the 1970s. We've seen that slow regression, and now we've gotten to a point where that warrior mindset is really non-existent in our society. Very, very few men could actually exhibit it.
Yeah, I find, just something practical. If you take students that are learning in Europe, take something like world history, you take, a 15-year-old, they'll be so much more educated than our education system. And a lot of who we become is from our childhood. So I see, just functionally, we're we're allowing that. We have something called participation trophies, right?
Yeah.
Participate. I mean, I don't know where that happened, but I always I am a deep empath, and I realized, and I do feel a lot. But what I realized when I hit my rock bottom emotionally was that the only thing that really matters in this world, functionally, we live one time, it's results, right? So if you work backwards from results, right, then that's where the samurai for me came in, which is basically you're living in this life and you're a conscious observer. So there's no, I have this emotion. Emotions are happening all parts of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And instead you observe the emotion and watch it pass through. That always spoke to me. So then the pain that you feel, it's just something that happens because there's up and there's down, and everything you can get is from yourself.
Interesting you say that, because I studied Zen Buddhism for many years. I was 2 weeks away from being an ordained priest, an ordained monk. And one of the reasons that I didn't follow through on that was because it started to kind of overlap with my Christianity, and there was a certain, I guess, a sand in the line that I wanted to draw. So I didn't follow through with it. But the actual techniques of sitting, meditation, and exactly what you just said, understanding the thoughts are there, and I teach this day in and day out, seeing the thought from an outside world, right? You're not in it. Understanding the emotion from an outside world. Again, you're not in it. And it's very much like Stoicism in many ways, where you're not attached to these emotions. I don't think men in our day and age understand that philosophy, where you could actually have an emotion, you can detach yourself from that emotion at that moment, see it as an observer, like you mentioned, and then from there, progressively understand it, and then let it go. Men, and you go back, and I equate this to active shooters, predators, people that are doing the wrong thing based on their emotions because they don't know how to separate themselves from their emotions. And we see that weakness happen pretty much everywhere in our society. I would love to use the phrase that where you're saying detach yourself from that emotion, and for more men to learn that and to see it as an observer and let it, kind of pass by and understand that it's just an emotion. Let me say one more thing. Men get attached to the sense of wanting to be happy all the time. Happiness is an emotion, right? Anger is an emotion. Depression is an emotion. Excited is an emotion. As warriors, and I link this back to that warrior mindset, we must learn how to detach ourselves from those emotions and acknowledge that they are just emotions. They cannot dictate and govern how we react in our lives. Because when you are a man that's emotional and reactive based on your emotion, you're going to get destroyed in this life. And that's what we're seeing right now happen in our society.
I think for me, you mentioned about happiness. I know for me in my journey, as each day, and I know this journey is going to be, because I can only reflect what it is. Obviously, we were talking about, I just had 11th child. We have about 400 employees,
God
businesses,
bless you,
run
man.
the podcast, all these things going on. And the thing is me finding internal joy within myself, by myself, with nothing.
Sure.
That work, but the happiness emotion, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to give away, in a way, that was the hardest death, if you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Give away my happiness. But that is the sacrifice, to find yourself and find that internal joy. At least that's where I was like, wow, some freedom, some sense of clarity. Right?
That's perfect. Like understanding that happiness is an emotion, and you are You're dying away from that emotion, but then it's joy, and I believe also it's a sense of purpose within you, which is critical. Having that joy and that purpose, and knowing that you are striving for something great, something that is there. Now, with that emotion, I want to say something also. It's being present. The samurai call it mushin, right? The state of being present here in the now. We miss that. We miss that everywhere. Many men will be sitting here having a conversation with you and I, and they're thinking about this, they're thinking about that, and they're not really here in the present moment. So when you do take the time with your kids and you're there and you're present and you have that sense of joy and purpose, you are in that state of mind. You are present, which is very small percentage of people can actually get to that level in our world right now.
I also did some time studying Zen Buddhism, and question, because I grew up, again, as Orthodox Jewish, and I did spend a lot of time on studying many different religions, and you didn't go through it. What happened there? I was just curious, because I know you mentioned it. It was a conflict with something that you understood in Christianity as a young child, or as what was the stigma there?
Well, I studied for many years, to be exact, 8 years.
Yeah.
And I studied under Roshi Philip Kapla, who was one of the first North Americans to actually be accepted in a Zendo in Japan, back in I believe in the 60s. And I studied, often with him. And we would have some great meetings, round tables like this, and sit down, and great philosopher, great individual. And I have still a journal explaining the first time that I actually went into the Zendo, and how, everyone was set in, Safu and Safutan, sitting proper with the robes so that was transformative for me in my life. As I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, what I started to see was, especially some of the koans, which are some of the riddles and some of the chanting and some of I felt like, even though it wasn't supposed to be like that, because when you look at the Buddha figure, it's supposed to be a reflection of you. It felt like I was kind of bowing down to a separate God or another God. So, I made the tough decision to kind of part my ways with Zen Buddhism, but I took every aspect of training, of philosophy, and I incorporate that into my life so much daily in everything that I do. And to backtrack, the reason why I went to study Zazen and Zen was because I was in that quest for really learning that warrior mindset. And I will tell you that Zen, that's where I found it, in that stillness.
I completely, I do relate to that very much so. As far as, going back, to the childhood, for you, what was the moment? I mean, were you always the way you are now, or was it training? I always think of, there's a moment in time.
Sure.
What was that moment in time you said, you know what? I'm going to choose purpose and meaning over, let's just call it, immediate gratification and outside stimuli?
I've probably never said this before on a podcast. That's a really good question. Very deep question. I grew up part of my life in Spain. My father was studying medicine there. And I remember my father, I started taking training in judo very young. And I remember my father taking me to a Bruce Lee movie in one of the old theaters there. And I sat down and I watched these movies with a sense of pride, of honor, seeing that Bruce Lee was a bully. And not a bully, that he was being bullied all the time. Right? That sense of, man, this guy's being bullied, but yet he holds strong, he's firm, and then at the end, of course, he unleashes, a can of whip ass, where he comes out and then he shows his skills, and and he beats the bad guys. And then something resonated with me very, very deep, where I wanted in my life to be the person that protected the weak. Something inside of me. And it was deeper than just saying, hey, I want to be a protector. It was like, I want to protect the weak. I want to protect those who can't fight. I want to step up. Almost like, to a sense, I want to be the hero. Okay. I felt like that was my calling and my purpose. So from a little boy, from a young, 7, 8-year-old young boy, this purpose of always beating the bad guy, protecting those that were weak, stayed with me in everything that I did. That's why when I started training really, really deep in the martial arts, this was back when I was 13 years old, I committed to the martial ways, and I haven't stopped since then. And the journey was a very deep journey. But to answer your question, yeah, it started really when me and my father started seeing these movies. He started communicating with me about martial arts, and it's just something that resonated very, very deep with me.
I tell you, the older I get, in many different areas, the injustices that exist, the anger that's possible when you really peel back the layers and you understand, and when you want to choose a life of purpose and meaning, it is very lonely. It can be very lonely, and what I'm seeing, so hopefully the listeners are understanding this, is that is the right way. That is the most fulfilling way to have that life, because people will come out of the woodworks that want to support this. And I see it. I'm seeing it. I'm meeting people each day and every day. And it's tremendous. Tell me, I know you speak a lot about a belief in God. And, that's a complicated relationship. Why do you feel, as a person going through life, why is it important? Let's call it a belief in something greater than yourself. Why is that important?
Well, I talk about serving for a higher purpose. And I truly believe that any warrior-minded man that walks this planet, if they're not serving for a higher calling, a higher purpose in their lives, something beyond them, they start living shallow lives, self-directed lives, which I don't believe in. I think we are all here in this planet to serve something higher than ourselves. I truly believe also that every one of us has the opportunity to do something great. And I don't mean great in the sense that you have to go out there in social media and become a great influencer. I'm talking about great by touching lives, changing lives in one way or another. And the more you serve for something that is higher than you, we talked about this before the podcast here. We talked about a universal God, an energy force, right? Okay. Whatever your God may be, okay, as long as we know that God is something higher than you, and you are serving for this purpose, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Whether you believe in this God or how, whether Jesus Christ was a Messiah, or we talk about even the Buddha, right? Or, we can go have all these conversations. The bottom line is the common goal to serve for something greater than ourselves.
And we're, functionally, whether, it could be communism, so they get rid of religion, where basically it's government. So we've seen government fail time and time again.
Oof.
Or sometimes sports becomes religion, right? In America, less and less people, and I don't mean religious dogma, but to your point, a higher calling. I know for me, again, I'm still going to be on my spiritual journey for the rest of my life.
That's beautiful.
But I know for me, when things are really, really hard and tough, the weight of that pressure, I'm able to put it off. I imagine it onto something greater. So if you just have yourself and you're born and you go and there's not that next level. Mm-hmm. When it gets really hard, what do you have? That's the thing. And tell me, you have this amazing company, Man of War, and the programs that you do. Tell us a little bit about that programming.
Sure. Well, it's it's not a program really. It's a lifestyle change. It's a way of life, right? I tell people all the time that what we do here is that we restructure how a man thinks and how he acts. And then more importantly, that combined is how he lives his life. I started the podcast by talking about the code of the warrior, right? This is essentially what this way of life is living by a code and understanding that living an honorable life, a life with integrity, a life with drive, with energy, with purpose, serving for a higher purpose, and more importantly, surrounding yourself with amazing men, because I truly believe who you surround yourself with can make or break your life. And when you get into a world, when you walk into our brotherhood and you realize that these men have gone through a very intense 5 days, a rite of passage per se, and this rite of passage is extremely difficult. It will break any man to his knees. We get a 45% dropout, and it's tough, intense. The coaches are trained to basically just destroy a man from the head down. But why, people ask, why am I going to put myself through that? I will say this. When a man is beaten down to the ground and he's capable of rising up through the adversity, through the challenges, through the anxiety and confusion and pain above all, something almost magical happens on the other side. We have changed lives within Man of War. I mean, we have rebuilt relationships. We have changed men from depression to purposeful men, like really with purpose now. We've seen men have, a very small component of business knowledge to now running multi-million-dollar companies because they've had that purpose, that drive. We've seen fathers that were weak coming in change their relationships with their sons, with their wives, giving back to the community in ways that it's very difficult to explain until you are there. But in the end, these men who, once they graduate from this Man of War rite of passage, they enter the Man of War society, which is this brotherhood, fire-breathing brotherhood, that I can tell you hundreds and hundreds of men are in this brotherhood and supporting each other and bringing forth the very best in each other. All of them living by the warrior's code.
Wow, it's tremendous. When they're broken, what does the next step? So I understand this. I work with a life coach for about 12 years, and I understand, he would bring me to places and make me sit in areas of exactly the places that I don't want to be in. Mm-hmm. And I'd sit in those places, and to the work to get to a blank slate, broken. And I guess the next step would be, as a brotherhood, to rebuild. What does your short and long term, who are you and what do you want? I assume that's...
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. When you rise up and then there's a very strong finish to this rite of passage, and when you are completely just working on fumes and just the mind pushing you through to the end, when you cross that finish line, it's just, you have this revitalized sense of energy and dynamic elements and more importantly that surround you, but more importantly is really the sense of your awareness of who you are, what you just accomplished, and the bonds and the camaraderie that are built. It's a very deep process. Now, of course, once you're broken and you start rebuilding yourself, the idea is to continue pushing and building based on that foundation that you have built. But the way that I look at it is this. When you break a man down deep into his soul, that foundation if you're laying concrete or you're laying a base, like anything, right? The deeper that foundation goes, the more solid the top form is. So it's almost like you dig deep, and from the men who start rising, start building that foundation very deep. So once you have that, man, the growth is incredible. And I've been around many different programs, and I've been around many different men. I've had the opportunity to coach thousands and thousands of men in my life. And I could tell you without a doubt that putting the men through this program is the most powerful thing that I've ever experienced and that I have seen men experience.
And probably now, I know it's over 10,000 people, you know, that must be the most fulfilling thing. You're looking at the people that passed, and it's a tremendous brotherhood, I assume.
It's a tremendous brotherhood. It's a very deep brotherhood. They know each other in ways that are, they get to know each other. They get to know their families, their wives. You know, we have a major event here at the end of the year. We always have it here in South Florida. We just had it in the Biltmore locally here in Miami a few months ago. It's a big gala, big, get together with all the men and their wives. And it's inspirational, motivational, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but it's like, wow, man, it just gives you that sense of energy, to live and serve that higher purpose.
I love the word integrity. What does that mean for you?
And integrity is all about doing the right thing when really no one is looking. It doesn't really matter who's looking at you. A lot of people do things just because they know that it's the norm for society, but they don't do it from the heart. Integrity for me is doing something right because you have sincerity of heart. Right? Doing it when no one is looking, when the lights are off, when you're in a dark room, you do the right thing.
For maybe over 10 years, I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I know I share the love of martial arts. Just curious what you find is the best efficient, for someone starting out in the martial arts space, what do you think is a good starting place? Where should someone go?
Everyone is different. People, I've trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido, Chinese Kung Fu, and Judo is my staple. But everyone is a little different, but I would say I like something that's contact related. So I like more karate style, sparring, jiu-jitsu. BJJ is phenomenal. Anything that can get you into a realm of discomfort, because I believe that discomfort, helps people really elevate a lot faster than just sitting there and doing forms in the air. So any contact base. I love Aikido. I think Aikido is beautiful. There's a lot of contact. Judo, a lot of contact. BJJ, a lot of contact. Muay Thai, a lot of contact. So as long as it has contact and it puts you in an uncomfortable position, that martial art is something that I think that you should start.
And the idea of discomfort, it seems to me the more controlled, let's call it controlled discomfort, because if you don't train to that controlled discomfort, loss, pain, things will happen to you, and you haven't emotionally gotten ready for that. That's what it seems like. So the more, right? So the more you can, in all areas of life, be comfortable with pain, because it's going to happen to all humans.
Sure. Agreed. I mean, that's that controlled discomfort is something that it's easier said than done, though. You have to put in the time and the effort to get to a level where you have control, that self-control, and understanding that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's within my control here. And the better you get, the longer that you can control that discomfort, and you can go deeper and deeper, without a doubt.
and I know you also have a great podcast, Men of War podcast. Is a lot of the what's a lot of the themes that come out of the show, or the top kind of things that resonate with you?
We've interviewed so many different men. I think that if you were to tell me a couple of things right off the bat is the ability to believe in yourself, truly believing in who you are and that you are capable of doing X, Y, Z. The other thing, resiliency, getting through the most difficult challenges of your life, but more importantly, learning from those mistakes. I call it never going back to the well, right? Because we tend to, go back to the well. And when I speak to men from all walks of life in my podcast, the first thing they will tell you is, listen, I learned from these mistakes. We talked about it before the podcast. Yeah. You failed so much, right? So much. But if you can just be a little bit more victorious, have a few more victories under your belt, the chances are that you're going to be progressing and growing. So that's, if you ask me, right there, resiliency, believing in yourself, and the ability to learn from your mistakes and not go back to that well.
I get this a lot, the concept of overcoming fear. What would you say is a practical tool for the listeners? I always think about that. You have this thing, this pit in your stomach, and you're afraid to jump. You're afraid to tackle what you're about to tackle. What would be a practical way to do that?
Well, several things, but typically what I would do is in any situation where you want to confront fear is I believe in breath control. I believe that sometimes people get in this mode of hyperventilating. They get nervous, so they let that nervousness take over. So one of the ways that I teach is, listen, you need to control pyramid breathing. Inhale, exhale, not through your mouth, through your nose, so you can squeeze those lungs and start really calming yourself down. I give that person 3, 5, maybe 10 breaths so they can control. Okay, and a lot of times what I'll say is, look, no matter what, take your mind, and this is funny, but this has worked a million times. Take your mind, and I want you to think of the worst possible scenario in your mind. And you need to, as a man, rise up and handle business. I'll say, go back to your family, to your wife, to your kids. Someone's doing something bad to your kids. Someone's doing something bad to your wife. Now you need to step up and protect it. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you get through this obstacle, this challenge, this fear. I would say 99% of the time, that shift, that breath control, bank. All right, they do it. It's almost like they get to the point where you're just like, okay, and I'm in. You shift. Reframing your thoughts is critical when you are dealing with people that have anxiety and that have fear. Just reframing that thought process, because we all know that in the end, and we can talk about this all day long, but 9 times out of 10, whatever you feared, once you conquer it and you get it over, you're like, oh man, this wasn't so bad.
It's always that way.
So,
what is something that you're deeply grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for being in a position to complete God's work. I really believe that what I am doing now, God has given me an opportunity to do his work. And that to me is as powerful as it gets.
Right, because it's a lifelong mission.
Yes, sir.
And what's something about you that people don't know?
That I'm really a nice guy. That I may look a little intimidating at times. I get that often where people think I'm very serious, but I'm pretty nice and pretty funny.
You seem that way to me, often on camera. Yeah. No, you're just real and you're accountable, and you're doing the work.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I really appreciate it. And Rafa, I want to say thank you. Really, this has been inspiring. Really, really appreciate it. People going on the journey, doing the work with action, integrity, like you're saying, accountability. How can people find you on social, learn more about your program? and learn more about you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Man of War with 2 R's. That's on Instagram. That's where I do a lot of my heavy work, but we're pretty much everywhere. Rafa J. Conde. I have a best-selling book. Just look it up on wherever, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It's there. You can follow me also on LinkedIn. And our website is manofwar.us. And you pretty much just Google me and you could find us. Simple as that.
Thank you. Really. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Okay, great team back here. Okay, so you guys are kicking butt.
Trying.
I appreciate you very much for actually speaking from the heart. You know, I go on a lot of podcasts, and very rare do I get someone that speaks from the heart like this. So may God bless you. Keep on going out there.
It's the only way. It's the only way we can do it. We just have to go there. That's
awesome,
where we're going.
Man.
So
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rafa. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Rafa. Next week, I'll chat with Travis Chappell. Travis is the CEO of Guestio.com, a game-changing platform that helps you find and book huge guests for your podcasts. He's also the host of his own hit podcast, Travis Makes Friends, and he's interviewed Shaquille O'Neal, global entrepreneur Patrick Bet-David, mindfulness icon Lori Harder, and hundreds more. He'll talk about his relentless entrepreneurship, his ability to connect with anyone, and the mentality you need to thrive. Please subscribe to our YouTube page so you never miss an episode. And if you're currently listening to the show on Apple or Spotify, we'd be grateful for a 5-star rating and review. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again next week.